I see that there's a way we can do it better. I see that there's a way that we can get more awesome results. There has to be a better way. You know, what worked last year may not work this year, but one thing continues to remain constant, and that's what John Maxwell spoke about, which is influence. But one of the things that is also key is how can we respond to change better and faster? You'd all agree with me that change is really dynamic right now, right? Right? Yeah, you know, change is so dynamic. It's happening, you know, just instantly. Everything is happening so quickly. Before you get on board with change, it happens. So who better to help us learn how to respond to change better and faster? You know, they call him an intellectual can of Red Bull. You know, I can't even wait to see him. I think I need some pumping music as I get Jeremy. Jeremy is just such an exciting person. You know, he's full of energy. So guys, give us some music, like really pumping. Let's start going. It's just after lunch. I'm waiting for the music. Come on, Jeremy. This is Jeremy Gutsche. Hey! Thank you, Jeremy. Welcome, Jeremy. Thanks, guys.
Well, I'm really excited to be here, and today I have a couple goals. I'm here to talk about how to help you get better at adapting to change and faster at finding ideas. And I'm going to do that in an interesting way, but I got this other note, which is I'm also the one that's supposed to be here to get you all riled up. We're talking about you at the next level, so I got to know you can make some noise. You guys ready to have some fun? I don't know why you're cheering. You don't even know if this is any good yet. I actually had a keynote, and it was at a university, and then right after, two young women, they came up and they asked me for, like, to sign something. So I was like, oh, okay, and I thought I'm being asked for my autograph, and then they said, great, thanks, because we can't get credit for class unless we can prove we were here. I'm going to do my whole keynote for you in 90 seconds in the true spirit of better and faster. And if you like it, then I'll continue. And if not, I don't know, let the egg pelting begin. It's going to be very visual, so you can feel free to basically stare at the screen for this part. Human hearts, rocket ships, scorpions, and origami. Those might seem unrelated, but they are connected through a pattern and chain of chaos. And if I can show you how to see that pattern, I could make you better theoretically at everything related to adapting. The catch is that whatever you're leading, whatever you're doing, your next breakthrough is probably closer than you think. But there's so many choices that you and your team make, and each choice takes you to a slightly different version of your full potential. So the question is, how do you know if you're making the right choices? People don't internalize it, but here we are experiencing history's highest rate of change, and yet our brains are still the product of 10,000 years of evolution, effectively as farmers. And that comes with a series of neurological traps that block people from hunting new ideas. Consistently, some of the brightest teams in the world have missed ideas so close within their grasp. Now, my story is that about a decade ago, I wrote a book on chaos that became a bestseller at a good time period, because then I got invited by about 500 CEOs to help them with reinvention of their brand. And I'm going to show you what I had the opportunity to learn from them to help make us all better and faster. Better by walking you through how to overcome the neurological traps that block successful people, and faster by walking you through 6 patterns of opportunity that we've learned at Trend Hunter from studying basically 300,000 ideas and how they were interacted with by about 150 million people that came through our website. From that, we've kind of gained a little bit more about how to tactically find your next big idea. If all that works, that'll make you better and faster, so that's your 90-second intro pitch. But the thing is, we're also here to have fun, so I was thinking there's a couple ways I could do these lessons. If you want, we could use Fortune 500 companies. Boring. You've heard that before. But if you were rowdy for me for one part, we could use lessons from bear fighting, the business of ugly, retro video games, reclusive billionaires and their hobbies, rap stars, and ex-criminal entrepreneurs. But you'd have to vote for this one loudly. What do you want to learn from, Fortune 500s or criminals? Some say they're one and the same thing. But it's an insightful choice, because if you made the Fortune 500 list in the 1950s, your lifespan as a company was about 75 years. And today, that has mathematically fallen to just 15 years, and it's expected to fall in half because companies are not structured to adapt. We put in rules, policies, procedures, structures to preserve the status quo. And in the 1950s, that worked. That helped you stay a blue chip company because you never messed things up. You never lost the farm. And it meant that you could forecast out 10 years and it would be fine. Today, you can't do that. And so while we're all pretty good at maybe picking out what might happen to us next year, once you start getting to about 3 to 5 years out, it's really difficult. So instead, what's needed as leaders is a new set of tactics on how to instead be structured to adapt. So I'm going to walk you through some concepts, but before I do, I want to use some peculiar examples to talk a little bit more about how chaos works. So for that, I'm going to kick us off with where I started, the hearts, the rockets, the scorpions, the origami. Those might seem unrelated, but not to Robert Lang, an origami expert for hire who uses the power of paper folding to save lives. And I can see it on your face. What's your name, by the way? Leslie. Leslie's like, I pretty much read her mind. She said, Jeremy, you can't save a life with origami. Is that what you said, Leslie?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. See? So I got one skeptic, but I'm going to work on it because he does, in fact, save lives with origami. And here's the difference between Robert and maybe me and probably a lot of you. How many people got that little crane? Who got this stupid little booklet on how to do origami? That's a metaphor of my failure up there. That's what you're looking at. We got it, but it's like you got to follow the instructions for long enough that I'd lose attention, so I could never really make that little crane. But Robert was different. He made that crane, but he'd love it. And then maybe in university, Catherine would be like, hey, Robert, you want to come have a beer after class? And he'd be like, yeah, see you there. Get me a Stella Artois. But then he'd sneak back to his dorm where he would obsess about paper folding. And you wonder, where does a guy like this end up? Does he end up with a job? Is he even employable? I mean, he does end up getting a job at NASA. How difficult can that be, right? And he has 18 patents in how jet propulsion can be impacted by lasers, like all of us. And the thing is, though, that what really excites him is that after working at NASA during the day, he goes home where he obsesses about the Japanese secret underworld of competitive origami, where he hopes, he prays that he could one day defeat a Japanese grandmaster at paper folding. So to get there, he befriends a buddy in Tokyo. His buddy in Tokyo will recreate his competitive fold and then put him in regulation competition against the grandmasters of paper folding. And I can see the skepticism too. You're like, no American can beat a Japanese grandmaster at origami. Come on, not possible. To do that, you'd have to complete an OI, an origami impossibility, like the black scorpion. Now, everything tells you can't fold that scorpion, at least not in one piece of paper. But Robert thought in almost all instances, there are patterns and clues all around us. This is what he learned at NASA, that would suggest our opportunity was there closer than we think. But we have all these patterns and clues. It could be a consumer insight. It could be a little tidbit of new information. And we tend to just walk past the new ideas and then overlook them. We go back to how we were doing things before. So in origami, he starts looking at that little scorpion, and he starts trying to purge his brain of everything he knows about origami. He trying to figure out if he can basically fold in a new method from scratch. He tries again and again. Then he starts using his computer. He starts trying to see if he can code origami. And pretty soon he realizes that he's done it. He has solved origami, and with a single piece of paper, you can fold anything. One piece of paper. The world of competitive origami would be forever changed. The average number of folds in regulation competition explodes from 30 folds per piece of paper to 100 folds per piece of paper. Are you kidding me? That leads you to the fateful day where you pick up your phone, you call your mom, and you tell her, Mom, you know, like the student loans and all this stuff and the job in the NASA thing? And you gotta be like, you gotta have your timing like fast on this. You gotta be like, I've decided to quit to fold paper full time. And you hang up. You gotta do it quickly because you gotta go fast. So this is Robert's story. This is about when I come into it because this is peculiar. So I want to interview him. I want to figure out what's happening. This is kind of weird. And actually, he told me a quote that his favorite interview question about leaving NASA was, why would you do it? And he figured he nailed it. And he means this seriously. He said to the interviewer, there are plenty of people doing lasers, okay? But the things I could do in origami, the world would be forever changed. And at first, it seems a little peculiar But when NASA needed to figure out how to fold a satellite to squeeze it inside the shuttle, they needed Robert Lang's origami. When the makers of a human heart stent needed to figure out how to get that stent inside a valve to unravel and save a life, they needed to fold it with Robert Lang's origami. When you drive your luxury vehicle knowing you have 13 airbags to save your life, it's because Robert's origami makes that happen. And perhaps most astonishingly, when bioengineers stack the human genome, they use Robert Lang's origami. So when I interviewed him myself, my biggest takeaway from his quotes and thoughts would be that he told me, almost all innovation happens by making connections between fields that other people don't realize. So as I talk about change and leadership and disruption, part of what I want to equip you with is a bit more of a toolkit to think about how to look outside your industry, how to connect the dots, how to see some of those patterns that might be so close within your grasp. And I'm going to do it in 3 steps. First, I'm going to talk about how to awaken your inner hunter, both in yourself and your team as leaders. And I'm going to do that with my favorite story in the world, which is the curious case of the boy businessman. And that little guy is my favorite story because he would grow up to be my dad. And I had this part where when you write a book, this is my second book, and I submit 60,000 words to my publisher, and then you're kind of like nervous because you don't know what's going to come back. And then my publisher, he's a little bit of a, I don't know if the cameras are on, I probably can't say it, but he's stern and direct. And so I get the call from him, and he goes, I really like page 86. And what about the rest? Is that all you liked? But page 86 was the story about my dad, and he said that reading that one little page or two made him understand everything else about my motivation and what I've done at levels that I never really internalized. So I flew back, and I interviewed my dad, and I had a weekend where I asked the questions that are a lot more sort of prophetic, like asking him, like, what's his philosophy on life, things he didn't ask as a goofy kid. And 7 days after I had my interview, he had a heart attack, and he died. And that's difficult, obviously, but imagine having had the opportunity to interview your dad and ask all those questions just a week before. So I'd like to walk you through his story, and I'll do a little tribute to my dad. Does that sound good? Okay, thank you. So basically, the guy in the middle is my dad, the bottom middle, and young Sig was born to a poor immigrant family in Calgary, Alberta, and they didn't have much, but they always ate well. They lived in a 600 shoebox of a square house with a mom that was a baker and a dad that was a cook. So with that, one day, he's walking through the grocery store with his mom, and there it is. The Kraft Philadelphia cream cheese looks so good. And he's sort of watching his mom, he's sort of like watching, and then when she's not looking, he smushes it into his face. And she's like strict immigrant mother, new to the country, trying to figure out to sees her son do that. So she grabs him by the neck, and she probably doesn't know what she's going to say. And then this is the best part. She gets to the storekeeper, and then she just goes, I caught this kid stealing. And they sentence him for basically a month to clean the shop floors after school. So he does that, and when he's sweeping the floors, he sees this weird thing that still happens today, which is that grocery stores discard food that is still good enough to eat, but not good looking enough to sell. And as a poor kid from the poor neighborhood, that stands out to him. That's really weird. So he strikes up his first ever business deal, and he agrees to sweep the floors for the rest of his life in exchange for the leftover food that he will sell to the delight of his poor neighbors at nice big discounts. And pretty soon, he's the first kid on the block with a leather jacket and a BB gun. His empire starts to expand. He gets into month-old magazines, door-to-door donuts, school supplies. But by 16, you're looking for something a little bit different. You're starting to look at girls a little differently, think of all that. And so I actually have a question. You got to be honest. Probably John Maxwell put that in one of the 5 steps. How many people here ever had or used a fake ID of any sort? Just put your hand up. Oh my God, that's a lot. It's a devious group we have here. Tonight you're here to party. I love it. Okay, so you can use your fake ID to get like a 6-pack of beer, or in his case, he used it to get his name on the lease of land tenant to be a bar owner. So by 16, he had a nightclub. But then the problem is that you go to place your first commercial order and you realize it's way more difficult to buy 1,000 beers than it is to buy 6 because he doesn't have a commercial license. The way around it that he realizes that's kind of neat is that you find a group like this. And running events, I can tell you, it's annoying. You're trying to find venues. They charge you wedding prices. They make you pay. It's just frustrating. And so he realizes you find a group like this and you say, hey, you can host your event at our party. Tell you what, special deal. We'll let you bring your own liquor, and that way you don't have to pay the markups. Cool? Then you have your party, you don't finish it all, you leave, he calls all of his buddies, and that is the shortcut to grade 10 popularity. But one day, actually, this is the example of stories that I didn't get growing up, only from my interview, when I'm like past the period where the parents are censoring what they did as kids. You want to hear that one? Yeah? Okay, so the police, he knows, are going to crack down, and so he rents it out to a religious group, and he thinks, how much trouble can they let everyone in a religious group just laughed? They're like, you don't know. Anyway, so he rents it out to a religious group thinking they'll be fine. He's got his alibi. He's at home doing his school, assignment. The police open up the door, and it happens that the religious group also likes their drinking. Okay, so they're in a little bit of trouble. They like their gambling. Oh, that's kind of neat. It's a headline now. 16-year-old local boy, running a casino. That's newsworthy. But what really makes the title write itself is when they also like their strippers. So now you get religious group XYZ, which we'll anonymize, caught at local 16-year-old boy's casino strip club. And that's kind of a headline for the front page. That kind of writes itself in Calgary, Alberta, at least. So he's grounded for the rest of his adult life. That's the catch. But to his friends, he's awesome. They elect him student council president immediately. This guy will plan our high school dance. And the problem, though, for him is that he did need to find a new business. And what he learned from this was that he realized, comparing that to, let's say, the grocery business when he was a kid, he's always willing to work hard. But the secret to remarkable success is more than just hard work. It's also about, at least in his mindset, an overlooked opportunity. Finding, and it could be in leadership, finding that great thing about someone that maybe they don't see in themselves, that opportunity in a business, etc. So I'm going to talk about this one a lot. I'm going to put this up a couple times today because this would be very much imprinted on me for my life, and it's very much dedicated to the sort of thing that motivates me. But in his world, just an example of the types of businesses he would look for, and some worked and some didn't, but he got a restaurant maybe when he was around 28 or so, and it was called the Roxbury, and not the one from the movie, but it was bankrupt, and he saw this thing for sale at a bankruptcy auction. He bought it for 10 cents on the dollar, not because he knew how to run a better restaurant, but he saw a 2-story brick building that faced rush hour traffic. And if you turned that into a billboard on the outside, suddenly it was a break-even restaurant before you cooked a single meal. And then he went his extra step, which is that he was willing to go and knock on every door within a couple miles. He figures 1,000 doors. So he'd knock on the door, he'd say, hey, how are you doing? I just got the defunct Roxbury down the street. And what's your name?
Lise.
Lise? I know that from before, actually. Trick question. She was the first one here. But he'd say, Lise, I just got this restaurant. Do you want to come and have a beer or a burger and tell me how to run this place better?
Maybe.
Maybe. He's not going to accept that as an answer. Are you going to come have a burger or beer and help me run this better?
Yes.
There we go. But imagine knocking on 1,000 doors. 3 things happen. 1, he makes a personal connection with his prospect or customer. Now, when she's thinking, do I go here or there? Well, she knows the person that owns this one, so she has that personal connection. The second is she's going to feel comfortable giving him an idea to teach him how to make something better that's in her neighborhood, that's in her best interest, and he gets to learn what's missing in the neighborhood. Finally, if you knock on 1,000 doors, a lot of people respond. Pretty soon, it's the new local watering hole. So that taught me a couple things, one of them being that your competitors are lazier than you think. And everybody wants to get better and faster, but not everybody puts in the effort. And in his world, he had all sorts of ups and downs. He'd go bankrupt, he'd get back at it, and he just had this quest to always find the overlooked opportunity. Charismatic guy, but just wouldn't say no to anything because he always wanted to try. And one day, he was presented with a very unique opportunity. He made a small loan to the owner of the Calgary Stampeder Football Club, and that guy was in trouble with the SEC, so he needed some money really quickly. So it's about enough money to buy a car with. My dad made the loan, the SEC problems escalated, and then the government went to my dad and they said, hey, like that guy's out, so this club is now in bankruptcy receivership, and there's only one tiny loan on the books, and it's to you. So I don't know if you realize this, but you are the de facto owner of a football team if you choose to accept it. The catch is that it's losing a couple $1 million a year, and he's not the guy with the deep pockets to withstand any additional loss. But now you know his story. Poor kid, poor neighborhood. This is sort of an irresistible challenge. His accountant tells him, you can't afford to do this. There's just no possible way. His buddies tell him, don't do it. This will ruin you. My mom tells him, this is probably the worst idea you ever had. And I tell him, you should probably do it. This seems awesome. So he does it. In his first year, though, he does sort of as expected. He loses all of his money. He loses the house. We have to move, all that stuff. But he's running it with a much different tenacity. He's picking up the phone with the players, and they're calling you saying, I need you to come watch me on Sunday. That's a different message than a regular telemarketer. And then he'd find someone with an empty seat in the stands. So he'd come up to you, Jude, and he'd sit down, and he'd say, Jude, you know what brought you to the game? And everyone kind of knew him because they knew of his financial struggles, and they wanted to save the team. Attendance was probably 15,000 people on average when he took it over. He'd sit down in the stands, and he'd spend 10 minutes with Jude, and he'd just befriend you. And he'd ask for your ideas, and he'd say, hey, what brought you to the game? Was it your mom or your dad? What got you into sports? What do you think we should do? How do we bring back the good old days? And then he'd say, you know, it's funny, Jude, I don't get it. Jude would be like, what do you mean you don't get it? No, but it's like, you know, you're so normal, but I like you. Hey, and then he'd say this, and he's in the stands. He'd go, everyone, can you look over here at Jude for a second? Jude, can you look back at people in the stands? Jude looks normal, right? Everyone? Jude looks normal. Yeah, I don't get it. And now what are you doing? You're wondering. And he'd go, no, it's just funny because, I would totally think you have friends. I do have friends. Then why is there an empty seat here, Jude? We need you to bring him to the next game or we're going to lose the team. We're in this together. And he was willing to repeat that joke, he thinks, 800 times over his 6 years. That's how many people he best calculates that he sat next to. 800 people all bringing their friends. All this stuff starts adding up. They go from 15,000 people in attendance when he took over to, by the second year, 35,000 people, which is a sold-out stadium in every single game for the next 5 years. In his total 6 years, they were first in the West 5 out of 6 times. They won the Grey Cup 2 of those 6 years. And in his final year, when he'd go in the stands, people would cheer for him because they knew what sacrifices he'd made to save the team. And when they had to vote for an MVP player, everyone started chanting his name, crossing the player names off the ballot, and they all wrote his name. So in his final year, he won the MVP trophy, even though he never played a game. That's the story of my dad. Thank you very much. So interview your parents. That's one takeaway. But be insatiable, push harder, act sooner, never give up. Those are some of the lessons he taught me. But also this is what burned into me the most. The secret to a remarkable success requires not just hard work, but finding an overlooked opportunity. And he wanted to train us on how to do that. So for my sister and I, we had a very different upbringing where every month he bought every magazine. And he himself had dropped out of university to become an entrepreneur, so he wanted to make a similar little training that he thought would be good for us. We'd buy everything, cars, trucks, fishing, boats. It could be any type of category. And then he'd flip open to the section with new stuff, new things, innovations, and he'd ask us, what do you think about this idea? How would we make it better? If we go to university or if we go to garage sales this weekend, what parts do we need to buy to build this? How much will it cost us? How would you make it different for the reader of this magazine? What would she want? And I did that with thousands of magazines. I made hundreds of prototypes. And this is the part that the publisher clued into because I never connected the dots, But this company I would go on to start, Trend Hunter Magazine, is a place where people from all around the world share business ideas in all different categories. It even had the word magazine in its original name, and I never connected the dots till after my dad had actually passed. But the only catch to all of that is that looking at so many ideas, just like you can do today online, leads us to a place where you'll see opportunity everywhere, as do I. The act of getting inspired for you and for the people on your teams has become overwhelming. There are so many ideas that now the true art is figuring out how do you pick, how do you filter through all the noise. And that probably then leads pretty well into what would become my sort of life passion, because I couldn't figure that out originally. I ran half a dozen businesses as a student, but didn't find out one that really felt exciting to me. I became a management consultant to help big companies innovate, hoping I would get an idea from them. But I was actually starting to get frustrated because I still was sort of like, in my mind, not an entrepreneur that my dad would have wanted. I'm burning my entrepreneur years. And I also thought I could be working with him, but I never took that opportunity because I thought I needed more training before I would come back. So I did my MBA and CFA to learn, hopefully find an idea, still didn't. I became director of innovation at a bank where my job was to find business ideas, which is ironic because I still haven't found just one for me. And what I was doing for them would eventually become a billion-dollar business, but find your 12-year-old self and say, guess what? You grow up to become a banker. No! It's a disembowelment joke. I thought it was funny, but when I ran my own conference and the whole front row was my former employer, they didn't think that one was funny at all. It's okay, I do that joke for me. There had to be another path. What was it? So I wrote a book on what I learned. It was a good time to write a book on chaos. That's why CEOs invited me to help them out. But I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I taught myself to code and made a place where people from around the world would share business ideas. And I thought some trend hunter somewhere will submit a little idea that would inspire my Canadian business. And that didn't happen because pretty soon there were a couple 100,000 hunters and 150 million total visitors all time to the site. So now that you know that it's a banker nerd in the background who made it, you'll realize it's been a big data experiment for 12 years. And what we can find behind the noise is really cool about how innovation works. So I'm going to walk you through some of those patterns, and I'm going to show you how to apply them. But the other thing that I'll do is also explain a little bit leadership-wise on how to open your mind to see those patterns, because my actual business has been then using this platform to help about 500 brands find better ideas faster. And in helping companies shorten their innovation cycle so they can innovate more, I've realized it doesn't matter if you're in banking, fashion, design, resorts, media. Everybody's trying to do the same thing. We're trying to figure out how to get our teams to change, hence the Change Leadership Conference, faster so we can innovate or create or whatever word you want to say, but ultimately do more things faster to ultimately get ourselves to a better place. And what blocks us all is very consistent. And this is where I get back to the metaphor of the farmer. After 10,000 years of evolution as farmers, our brains have evolved to a point where when we find something that works, our farm, which could be how to motivate a team, how to excite someone, the brand or product that you sell, the way you promoted last time, you're pre-wired to repeat and optimize whatever led to last year's harvest, not to lose the farm. Some quick examples. You've heard of these companies, but I've interviewed the humans, and it's sort of interesting. That's Steve Sasson, and I talked to him because he invented the digital camera in 1975. Are you frustrated with what happened in Kodak? That's me expecting him to say yes. He said, no, actually, I loved my job, and I loved the culture. But looking back, I realized culture, which is about leadership, a great culture can be the seed to your own destruction. Their culture was about defeating Fuji, no matter what. And that meant it a high-quality print. Fuji set up an office outside the Eastman Kodak office that was an old building they took over to just have a billboard that said, we're hiring. It was a recruiting office. They viscerally hated each other. So even though Steve came up with the digital camera in 75, sharing photos over the phone lines by 76, the idea of uploading pictures of your face to share socially with your friends on the internet in the 90s, that'll never work. All of these ideas didn't get fully absorbed into Kodak or take off, not because they weren't aware of them, but because they weren't willing to lead the change, to try something new. It's a Canadian example. We should skip it. Let's not draw attention to this. At BlackBerry, there was such a strong mentality that we had the best business phone that the leaders protected that business market so intensely that they could never see that their knockout punch would come from a goofy consumer phone. Blockbuster Video was started by a database expert. Decades ahead of its time, it was a big data experiment. They could predict your preference in movies better than anybody. And that meant when they decided to pioneer online video, they caught up to Netflix in 6 months. Out of desperation, Netflix went to them and gave them 3 chances to buy all of Netflix for $50 million. The board of directors decided this is too distracting. CEO, you're fired. New CEO comes to us from 7-Eleven. Please, return us from retail to retail greatness. We ask only 2 things of you. Please fire the online team. These are the ones I interviewed. And stop talking to Netflix, please. You make like one bad decision. Anyone know what these are? I gave a big book to my niece who's like 5. I'll show you her later because we're going to have a creative challenge with her, you versus her. But she tries clicking open books. This doesn't make sense. She doesn't like it yet. Bill Gates goes to Britannica and he wants to digitize. And they say, no, you will bastardize the sum of human knowledge, which is a powerful quote, actually. But they're worried that he'll ruin things. And they're making $2,000 every time they sell a collection of leather-bound books. So he decides to buy them. They don't want to sell. Okay, cool. So he goes to Funk and Wagnalls, which was sold out of grocery stores, adds pictures, and makes Encarta. You know of Encarta. But what you might not realize is that it was a chess piece paired with the Windows 95 Mega Launch to reposition the computer as a device from being a device for nerds to being a device for families. So this little nugget is something Bill Gates knows as his chess piece that helped turn him from a billionaire to a tens of billionaire. So even being Bill Gates, one of the most innovative people on the planet, he started to farm this. And when a bunch of amateurs started creating Wikipedia, he had years to convert this to become free content or online, but he didn't want to, and that team tells me it's because this just meant too much and it was too anchored. So a bunch of amateurs build Wikipedia into the 5th largest website in the world, excluding pornography. And AshleyMadison.com. Got to support your local Toronto startups. Last example, guess the company. Does anyone here like winning? Yes. Down there they don't? Does anyone down there like winning? Okay, so this is a game of guess the company. Guess it if you know it. Any guesses? I love this. That is so good. You're already guessing. That's the desire to win. It's like, I got this. I don't need clues. I am ready. Put me in the game, coach. That was good. Well done. Okay, I'll give you clues, which might make it easier. From their website, and GE is a good guess. Blank has been turning creative ideas into breakthroughs for well over a century. Guesses? IBM, solid. GE, IBM. We got 2, that's it? Samsung, Texas Instrument, Apple. They invented grammar checkers. 3M, invented electronic dictionaries in 85. Webster, laptop word processors in 89. Casio's, guess? Toshiba, PDAs in 94. The answer is Smith Corona, the best typewriter company in the world. And that's a title they still have today. Now, actually in my first book, which I'll give you free as a download, I dove a lot deeper into them. I always find them as a very interesting example to compel a leadership team into action. Because the deeper you go into the case study without saying the name, the more they sound just like your company. They made all the right decisions with all the right Harvard MBAs working for them. But they got into computing in a joint venture. Cool, low-risk way to do it. Awesome. Then 1991 came about, and times were tough, and they said to the team that was working on this, hey, we need you to come over here and help us on relocating the plants to Mexico. This is the highest NPV project. You can come back to this in a couple years when the market's ready. 3 years after that decision, Smith Corona declares bankruptcy, and their joint venture partner, Acer, becomes the 2nd largest PC maker in the world. I show you these concepts because I'm going to talk about finding ideas, but actually the leadership and change management philosophies that you create in your culture are what will dictate whether or not you can harvest the ideas. These companies didn't just spot an idea, they invented industries like smartphones. digital, basically laptop and word processing, digital cameras. I mean, it's pretty huge. And those ideas were so big, yet their cultures were not able to change, so they didn't even leap at ideas so big. Well, what hope do the rest of us have if we're not inventing the digital camera? In each case, they missed out on a much bigger opportunity, and they showed us we repeat whatever led to last year's harvest, we farm. So I'm going to walk you through a bit about how the farmer versus hunter mentality traps ensue, and I'm going to do that showing you two unique examples. This guy here is Roy, and all Roy ever wanted to do was to become an entrepreneur. And he wanted to do something in retail. He was a marketer in the space, so he would go to the mall, and he would just watch what people were doing. And he hoped one day he would get his idea that would trigger him. And he's not really finding the idea. He's in the department store. Now he's in the section with the lingerie. And it's like, I don't have an idea, but I could get this for my wife. Tonight could still be a good night. And then he looks over and he feels like he's being stared at like an unwanted intruder. It's for my wife, I swear. So he gets in his car and he leaves with two consumer insights. He thinks first, what if there was a shop for men to buy lingerie? What if there was a shop for men to buy lingerie for women? Totally different store. You got to nail that one right. And if they had fashionable lingerie, boy, that would make men happy. So he took his idea and he started a store. It became successful, so pretty soon he started expanding without realizing he was headed for bankruptcy. With 7 stores, the problem was his market around him changed a little bit. And he didn't realize he was wrong when the market was a little different. He was wrong because he thought his success was because he made a shop for men. And now he was the millionaire, and you're not. So if you come and tell him that's not the reason for success, it's tough because he's already farming his consumer insight. The second thing is that his actual reason for success was fashionable lingerie and bringing it to America, but not because it makes men happy, which is what he thought. It's different. It's because it makes women feel confident. And that's subtle, but in the world of consumer insights, the smallest little thing makes a massive difference. Because when the department stores simply decided to add fashionable lingerie, that's where ladies already like to shop. So now nobody went to Roy's store, and he was forced to sell Victoria's Secret for $1 million. The new owners, Limited Brands, repositioned to make a store that made young women feel confident, and they grew their $1 million investment into a $6 billion mega brand. Now, you could say Roy missed a $6 billion opportunity. The unfairness in that is that you don't have somebody that walks into your job to show you the giant opportunity that you're overlooking. The similarity between Roy and the rest of us is that we share the same neurological wiring. And the traps of the farmer are, first, with success, we become complacent. We don't like to admit that word, but ultimately we don't try as hard as we did when times were tough or maybe when we were just out of school. The second trap is that we become repetitive. And we don't like that word either, but ultimately we try and repeat whatever led to last year's harvest. And finally, we become protective of our egos, of those things that led us to such success. So let me show you a different psychology brought on by this guy. And I can be in a room doing a keynote with 10,000 people. People don't know who this guy is, which is interesting, but I'll give you the reason why it's interesting. He's a 77-year-old dude who works really hard and wears the same blue outfit every single day. He eats lunch at the same place, and his career ambition is that one day he'd like to buy a house. But he's got a condo that's so close to work. He could afford that house because he is worth more than all of these characters combined. Because Amancio has amassed a $70 billion fortune due to his creation of the fashion empire Zara, which is funny because he dresses like that. Now, over at, let's say, Louis Vuitton, LVMH, they don't look over at Amancio and think that he's a better fashionista than Karl Lagerfeld. They don't think that he's individually got that fashion sense. They see how he dresses too. But what he's done, which is very applicable for a change leadership event, is that he's figured out how to manufacture adaptation through his company's culture. When LVMH's fashion director looks over, they say Zara is possibly the most innovative and devastating retailer in the world in all categories. And here's why. Someone comes up with an idea for a little red dress. Lise, don't pick the color red. We can pick the color later. We'll just make it grayish, a material we can dye. Catherine says, when can we get the marketing material ready? I want to get this out there. We don't have time to ever market this, and don't worry, we're only going to send 5 little dresses to each of the little stores. Then the next thing, we've got Adam here, and he goes, how are we going to get this to China to manufacture? We don't have time. We have to do everything local. Because while everyone else goes from drawing to dress in stores in 12 months, Zara does that process not in 14 months, not in 14 weeks, but 14 days. And this is just the beginning. You see, the real miracle happens when a young woman walks in the store and the storekeeper comes up and they'll say, hey, what do you think about that dress? What's your name, by the way?
Lauren.
Lauren, what do you think about that little red dress?
It's trendy.
Oh, that's good. This example, though, works a little bit better if you don't like it. Let's try. What don't you like about this? Do you like this dress?
No, I hate it.
Yeah. And what do you hate about it?
It's too short.
On the top or the bottom? Which would you? No. I thought you were going to say the stripe because I drew it in PowerPoint. Let's try that. What do you not like about it?
The stripe.
Yeah. Give it up for Lauren. Oh. So every day, the storekeepers go back to their terminals and they write down, dress 446, Lauren came in, didn't like it, didn't like the stripe. The designers only made the dress 2 weeks ago. They get the feedback, they remove the stripe, and 5 new dresses head to all 2,000 stores. When they expanded into Australia, Zara's become such a powerful icon that it was noted in The Guardian that getting a Zara is the signifier of a stylish cité. That's my best Australian accent. But basically, all my accents will revert back to my Irish accent, like my Irish side of so you got to watch out for that. I'm not really good at the accents. They found a girl, though, who's 16, and they asked her what she thinks. So put yourself in her shoes, and then her Australian accent comes out really nice. Thank God, we won't have to be a third world fashion country anymore. Nailed it, right? No, I'll never do another. That was my Irish accent. Here's the thing, though. I would like to find that girl to be able to say, hey, guess what? That's the guy that made your dress. Now, in Amacio's world, his thoughts on change leadership would be summed by the only thing he's often ever caught saying. The daily task is marked by self-improvement and the search for new opportunity. And for him, that's a mantra, not just internally, but also for the rest of his company. And part of this is just what has helped him add up to a business model that is better and faster. If we compare the two psychologies, at Zara, they actively fight complacency with insatiability. And that means something. We're going to talk about it a little bit more, but they never believe they're done. Whether you have a new idea on how to motivate a millennial or you have a concept for how to get someone in the store that's different. They fight repetition with curiosity, which is encouraged. We'll talk about that differently as well. And finally, they're willing to destroy egos. Be curious, be insatiable, be willing to destroy. These concepts can help you be better at adapting, but one thing I also want to address is that I don't talk about these as things you must 100% adapt to. You need to hunt and farm to be successful. The difference is that most companies get caught up in a trap of just farming. So I'd like to say I'm not asking for 100% of these hunter instincts that come out, but 10%. And I think about innovation like portfolio management. People often ask, oh, my company's resistant, or how do I actually get people to think differently? I like to use portfolio management because it's a language every CEO understands. But also, if we use the Smith Corona example, that high-risk part of their portfolio was the typewriting business, or the computer business. And if you thought about your company like an investment portfolio, you would never get rid of the computer team because that's your high-risk bet that you need. So we're going to talk about these concepts then in terms of the little bits extra, the 10% extra that you could do within your culture to make change happen. For complacency, I have a question. It's serious and important, but I need to know, who is the greatest rapper of all time? Let's figure this out. Dr. Dre, Biggie Small, Drake, Eminem. Kanye'd be so upset right now. Beastie Boys. I think I've heard a couple that aren't rappers, so I'm probably going to end this. The greatest rapper of all time is MC Hammer. Reason why? My proof point, at the peak of his fame, he had a 300-person entourage. This man got it right. They had a $500,000 salary for a month for the entourage alone. 2 Boeing 767 planes to fly the entourage around. Why? Because Hammer Time was going to last forever. Only it didn't, or we'd all be wearing those pants. On an individual level, Hammer shows us human nature is to assume the status quo will last forever. Interestingly, he came back with many extra albums, and he had 8 dot-com startups funded by venture capitalists, but he would continually repeat a cycle in his life of becoming very wealthy and bankrupt. We think it's an isolated thing with rap stars. Let's dial it up a little bit. If you watch ESPN's documentary, you can see, Broke it's called, 78% of NFL players go bankrupt within 5 years of playing. They know this, so they sit them all down and give them financial literacy and training courses, but it doesn't matter. Thousands of young men keep going through the same pattern. And this happens with serial entrepreneurs. And actually, the scary thing is, it happens with companies. But when it happens with companies, it happens at much bigger and much more expensive price tags. This all wraps up to say, your success fuels complacency. The way out of this is to be insatiable. We mentioned the Zara story. I'm going to get into a couple parts later about insatiability. Peter Drucker, the most famous management theorist of all time, used to say, it's not the questions that change, it's the answers that do. And so on that note, I'm going to pose to you 16 specific questions today, and at first your answer to them might seem intuitive, but these are questions specifically designed to get you thinking about change and innovation. So I'll pose them to you, and you'll get them as downloads later. But as I pose them, remember, everyone wants to get better and faster, but not everyone puts in the effort. So for question 1 on insatiability, how often do you experiment with ideas that might not actually work? It's not an experiment if it's just something new. How differently would you act if you knew there was a team working 24/7 to eat your lunch? Next up, we have repetition. How many people have played Farmville, Angry Birds, Candy Crush? Yeah, put your hands up, yeah. How many people bought stuff on Farmville? Who's got like some seeds or cows or anything? It's embarrassing, you shouldn't admit it. Here's the thing. Angry Birds alone sold over $2 billion of virtual goods, but all of these games benefit from the concept that was previously invented as shareware. Try something for free, the freemium business model, and pay later. That was invented. It was invented by 2 guys that were buddies, George and Scott. And they made this concept to sell video games in the 80s. Then one day they said, you know what, this shareware thing is awesome. Let's make our own video game. So they spend $300,000 and they make Duke Nukem, which takes them about 6 months to make. And it's successful. Now they're starting to get a little bit wealthy, so they make Duke Nukem 2. Now they're millionaires. So now they make Duke Nukem 3. Now they're tens of millionaires. So what do? Well, you want to work on Duke Nukem 4. So they come up with a title, Duke Nukem Forever. They start working with their team, and this will be the greatest video game of all time. It's already the top franchise. They've built something beautiful. It's now worth tens of millions of dollars. It's starting to be more similar to the large companies that you work for. They go to the E3 gaming convention, and a competitor releases a new programming engine, which means they could have made Duke Nukem 4 better than they had. So they had revealed screenshots, and fans are super excited, but then they go back to the office and they say, George and Scott, you know what? Forget it. Scrap what you were doing. Everybody, we're starting again. We have money. We can afford this. We're not releasing. We're going to make the best video game ever. So now they work several years. They get ready to launch. When they're ready to launch, a competitor comes out with a new gaming engine. Well, we already know what to do. Scrap it. Start again. This will be the best game ever. Duke Nukem 1 took 6 months and cost $300,000 to build. Duke Nukem Forever, aptly named, took 15 years and burned all of their $22 million fortune. They would need to bring other people in to fund its launch, but think about how much happened in 15 years of video game history. When it launched, it flopped. They show us that once we're successful, we repeat and optimize until perfection and sometimes irrelevance. And again, you start adding this up to larger companies than just this little video game duo, and the price tags become bigger, but it happens more frequently than you think, showing us that smart people overestimate control. And the way out is to fuel curiosity. I have a whole thing on this, which we're going to do as our last section, so we're going to skip curiosity and just give you the questions. How much time do you spend hunting new opportunities? That's question 1. And question 2 is how much freedom do you have, and in your leadership style, do you give for people to experiment with high-level ideas? For protection, we talked about how a company can be too protective, particularly with the Kodak story. I like to just basically say that to adapt, you need to let go. And I'm going to talk about this one a bit more with willing to destroy. First by asking, who here would rather, if we had to pick, what would you guys rather fight, a bear or a kitten? Just say it again.
Kitten.
A kitten. Why would you fight a kitten? You didn't have to fight a kitten. You could have said neither, because you could beat it easily. So there's a guy in Ontario, and he did want to fight a bear, but he, unlike others, he built himself a bear fighting suit. And then he got his buddies to set him on fire, throw logs at him, throw him off the cliff to prove that it works, run them over with their cars, and then beat him up. And they gladly agreed. They had a lot of fun with it. Wait for it. Wait. Whoa. This is unrelated to any business thing. I just wanted to show the story. No, I'm just kidding. I interviewed a guy named Peter Lynch, who's an award-winning Canadian film director. This is in his the top 100 films to watch that are Canadian-made, actually. Quentin Tarantino says it's fantastic. But it's called Project Grizzly, and it explores this guy. And I asked him, how do you make a documentary film? Like, what's the creative process? And he told me something really unique. He said that when you do a documentary, you don't yet know the story arc. And so you're shooting things and figuring out how to put it together. And what he always does, is he told me, you take your best idea, your best footage, and you throw it away. And that way you look at everything and you see a better story. And I said, oh, and then you put it in at the end? No, you never put it in. It's like you're not listening, Jeremy. Oh, okay, sorry. He always throws away his best footage and it's gone. And he said if you had the best footage, you would have lost all your empathy for the character. He would seem too dissimilar for you. It'd be funny, but you wouldn't be, your heart wouldn't be in the movie. So he teaches us, you take your best idea and you throw it away. Different examples. This is Eric Repair's kitchen in New York. Eric Repair is the longest-running Michelin star chef who resides in the United States. And what's funny about how he does that is they say that it's easier to win a Michelin star than it is to keep it. Because you could be a one-hit wonder, but to keep it, you must continually evolve. And his process is, you walk into his restaurant. What's your name? Amanda. Amanda walks into the restaurant, and she says, hey, I'd like the chicken cordon bleu. And he goes, you didn't look at your menu. How come you said the chicken cordon bleu? Well, I've heard about it. I've heard it's really good here, so that's why I came. Okay, Amanda, because of you, the chicken cordon bleu is no longer ever available. Would you like something else? Would you like a different chicken dish?
No.
No, well, that's too bad. That chicken cordon bleu is a recipe I've now purged and forgotten. It's done. It's gone. Fine. She says, I'll try the new chicken dish. He goes back, starts experimenting with flavors, trying different things, mixing up different combinations, setting some things on fire, and he brings Amanda a new chicken dish, which she will love. In his mind, he never wants to be recognized for a signature dish, and his signal is the day someone comes in asking for something when they hadn't, actually even tried it. So Eric shows us that you need to break free from past success. Now, this could make you think of the phoenix, which sets itself on fire in response to a foe and reincarnates out of his own ashes. The phoenix story was really interesting for Joanne. Joanne loved the phoenix, and one day, though, her husband left her one year. Her husband left her, her mom died, and she lost her job. And she didn't actually even get in this university she wanted to get in, everything kind of fell apart. So she went back to England and she decided to write a book, her true passion. And she wrote a book actually about a phoenix. And it helps to write a book about a phoenix if you're Joanne, because soon you'd become a billionaire author. Now, here's the thing. When Joanne, J.K., decided that she was done writing about magic, she wrote another book called Casual Vacancy. And it was a murder, like a mystery, sort of detective novel. The thing, though, is that she started getting reviews that were horrible because the people read it who were Harry Potter fans. And so there's that. It just got destroyed on Amazon, and it's a bestseller, but it has reviews like this one. I found this gem. My 8-year-old read this. I'm disgusted by the sex and drug use. Maybe your 8-year-old shouldn't read this. So she decided to destroy and recreate. She erased her name from the next book, legally protected a new name which was never meant to be discovered, called Robert Galbraith, and that is actually still the book she writes under, although people sort of eventually clued in that this writing is too good and this person is too talented. Now she's having more fun with that whole process. All of these stories teach us to obsess about your next customer, not only the ones you have. And I should point out that's my quote, not JK's, because one time somebody quoted that was JK, Jeremy said, JK said, and I didn't. It's not even that good of a quote, honestly. It's just something that was in my book. And then I got off the stage and they said, we need to talk to you immediately. And at the time, 4% of JK Rowling's tweets became about me. Like, who is this Canadian? I would not say that. And then all of a sudden I have thousands of Harry Potter fans all around the world that are like, who are you? That's cruel. Anyway, finally I got a hold of the PR team because I interviewed them for the book. And then they said, okay, she revokes or she retracts her comments. Okay, but can she just plug my book? I don't care who buys it. Anyway, that's my little story of JK. For Willing to Destroy, how much simpler would your business be if you restarted from scratch? And how much freedom do you have or do you give for people to stray from past success? Be curious, be insatiable, be willing to destroy. This wraps up the first section that I have. I'm going to give you a link at the end of the day. It's trendhunter.com/secret/change leadership. But you're going to get $1,000 of free extras, including a 10-minute test that you can take, and it's really cool because it's all free, but it will show you how much each of those traps actually impact you, your innovation archetype, and then based on your strengths, how those cause certain weaknesses when you interact with the teams. And if you have a bigger team and they all do it, then we can show you some more revealing things about your culture. But let's move on now to how to actually hunt for new ideas. And for this, I want to bring back this little bastard. Do you remember that guy? He pops up, your computer slows down. It's Clippy. And Clippy will tell you things based on what you're writing. Hi, it looks like you're writing a passive-aggressive letter to your neighbor. Can I help? That little guy. Okay, so I have Clippy here because I want to do a little thing. What can you do with a paper clip? Let's start working on this creative challenge. What can you do? Hold paper together. Nailed it. That's one. Pick a lock, devious. I knew that from before when you were suggesting ideas before we started. 2. Reset your phone. That's 3. Christmas ornament. 4. Your Christmas tree must look awesome. Slingshot. 5. More devious. This whole side. Jewelry. Clean your nails. 7. Zipper pull. 8. Jump a fuse. Another devious one. 9. Restart your computer. 10. Hang pictures, 11. Toothpick, I'll buy you a toothbrush after. It's okay, 12. Hair clip, 13. Make a chain, 14. Jumper wire was set, so now we're repeating. Okay, so now we're about up to 14, and we slow down. Here's the thing, average group of adults, if you give this as a creative team, give them however many minutes, they'll come up with about 14, 15. But the average group of kindergarten students will come up with 200. And the reason why is all the ideas that were just said are probably things that we've done before, except the toothbrush one, I hope you didn't. But, and we're being confined by what we've actually done or seen. A child will play with dimensions of space and time and things that we forgot. So here's a quick example. My niece, Allie, from 2 weeks ago, was given the same challenge.
I have a question for you. What can you do with a paperclip?
It can be a needle. It can be a sailboat. It can be a nail, a fireman pole. Whether it's a builder's that they drill.
How do you come up with so many ideas?
Think, and then you can make these stuff. But it's still more ways to do
any other ways that I could be creative like you?
You think in your brain and you close your eyes and you think what it could be, and also you can watch documentaries to find out if that's true or not. Jeremy.
That's pretty good.
Give it up for Allie. It's her big debut. Now, I would argue that we've all become more intelligent, but over time, we do become less creative in terms of raw creativity because we bind ourselves to things that we've done before. So, if we've lost 95% of our ideas in that paperclip example, my job is trying to get you back up to 200 ideas, but doing it in a methodical way. And the way that I do that is with the patterns. So we would help clients approach their problems from 6 different angles, and if that's working, then we get to 36 different angles, and we use this to even figure out the 18 most powerful trends impacting the world. I'm going to give you some follow-up info on this, but for today, I'm going to high-level cover each of the different patterns and a little bit about how you can apply them to your creative problems. Easiest way I would re-articulate this is that when a big innovation happens, like Facebook, it's like a splash in water, and that splash creates ripples of opportunity. So you can either try and emulate your competitor, or you can do things you did before but slightly different, or you can study the ripples that are happening and find real ideas. With Facebook, as an example, in 2007, they had 50 million users, so they were worth studying. And they were a site for friends to archive photos of their everyday life. So Google allocated 1,000 software engineers for 10 years on what would become Google's largest and most expensive failure. And you don't find it in the Google results, haha. Nice when you control that. But the reason why is that they realized that we have all your friends on Google, we can archive everything, you're on us every day, cool, we can win. So they tried many failed experiments, but a decade of them failing while Facebook grew from 50 million to 1.5 billion causes them to realize that wasn't the right strategy. If we went pattern by pattern, you break down your competitor or any force, and for each of those 3 different aspects, you'd apply all 6 patterns, and you could get 18 ideas. Let's take a really quick example. Divergence. People don't want to be part of the mainstream. If Facebook is a site for friends, its success creates an opportunity for something not just for friends. That's Twitter. If people are archiving all their photos, what if I don't want my party photos archived for the rest of my adult life and all future employers or parents to see? Creates an opportunity for something less permanent. That's Snapchat, $35 billion IPO, 7 years after this Facebook event. If people are photographing their everyday life with their 2007 mobile phone cameras, they are ruining the art of photography, and something must bring it back. So 7 years later, 12 people code up Instagram and sell it for $1 billion, which is a nice check to split 12 ways. So let's go through, and we could do 50 more examples from Facebook, but I'm going to go through the patterns high level. So for acceleration, I need to know, and actually you can be loud about it because you're the competitive ones. Who here has ever been in a marathon before? Yeah, who'd rather stay at home and watch TV? Who'd rather drink some beer with me in Toronto today? Who'd rather pay to get electrocuted? Usually there's one. Hey, who is a marathon runner? Okay. How'd you place? How'd you do? Roughly. See. So now, here's the funny thing. People do a marathon. I don't even want to run a marathon with you because you already finished. I don't even want to do that. But you run a marathon and then people say, hey, how'd you do? Good. Or a 1,000th? Well, that's too bad. Better luck next year. No, 1,000 is incredible. There's like 100,000 people. Easy, easy, take it easy. Why does that always happen? The reason people ran the marathon was because they wanted a sense of achievement. Is that correct? Plaque on the wall. So if that's true, why do we have a timer and why do we have a ranking? A guy named Will Dean said marathons are stupid, and he told me that very experience is why he doesn't like a marathon. So instead, he created Tough Mudder as a place where you would just complete things. You have no timer, you have no ranking, which causes you to run with your friends. So now when you say, do you want to go run a marathon with me? I don't want to run a marathon with you. Want to do Tough Mudder? Okay, that could be cool because we would do it together. Also, you're completing things and you're getting photographed with your bib number, so they send you the photos, and on Monday morning you can be pretty sure I will send you the picture of me running through a mud bog while getting electrocuted. They go from $0 to $50 million in just 2 years, and their two competitors get to pretty similar sizes at about the same time frame. They show us that you're not trying to make a bigger marathon, you're trying to rethink about what people actually want, and that's what you accelerate. In this case, there's thousands of marathons, but nobody really clued into the fact that people really just wanted completion. So acceleration can be perfecting one thing, having an aspirational icon like IBM did with Watson, exaggerating a feature, or reimagining a solution. Homework questions or workshop questions for your team would be, what is it that you're actually trying to achieve? What are we actually doing? And visualizing that can help you think through the changes that get required. And how might you redefine your most important feature to satisfy that need? Cyclicality is something repetitive, and you can think of fashion, nostalgia, retro economic trends. I'm going to go quick through this one just to say that often these trends seem really obvious in retrospect. So I like to use a little metaphor to help think about it, and that's the metaphor of the giant sea turtle. Up close, it looks random. It goes left, it goes right. I don't know what those signals are. It's a sea turtle. Cool. Just like in your own job, you see little signals, but you can dismiss them because you're in it. But if you stood back from your job, if you stood back from that sea turtle, you'd realize it's actually in the middle of a 20,000 kilometer migration path that takes it 2 years to complete, bringing it right back to the very same beach where it was born, and it repeats the exact same pattern 50 times in its 100-year life. But in order to see the pattern in your role, or this sea turtle's life, you need to step back, look for clues, and when you start seeing them, act fast. For the sub-patterns a bit more intuitive on this one, so I'll skip that, but I will say that the questions are kind of neat. Imagine thinking since your last reinvention, how much of styles, technology, and culture changed? And what do your next customers think about your relevance? I could do the lesson of convergence either with a crystal meth addict or the guy on the left. What do you choose? A little left-right joke for you? Okay, Bill Gates or a criminal? Criminal. We got to get more enthusiasm for that one. Do you guys want to learn from criminals today? Yes. There we go. So this is Dave Dahl. He was living that good life. Fast cars, exotic dancers, police chases, crystal meth. And eventually that catches up with you. And when he's in jail, he can't help but think how different his life would have been if he simply joined his dad and his two brothers at their little bake shop. A tiny little Portland, Oregon shop that, you know, it maybe was like a $200,000 a year type thing. Just a mom and pop bakery. And when he got out, he didn't know how to make them better. He didn't have the eureka idea. People think innovation is about the big eureka idea. It's usually not. It's usually all the little things. So in this case, he made them organic. He knew that would get the people that like organic ingredients. He made them local delivered with local ingredients, which actually gets the restaurants on board, different market. He put solar panels on the roof, which gets the eco crowd, and that's cool because they don't care what the food tastes like. He brought fair wages. I have solar panels. It's all good. It's a fair shot. Fair wages to the area, and then finally, socially good missions, which is basically that he would hire and rehabilitate ex-cons, and he would pay them a fair wage, which is not something that happens. Finally, shock branding was big at the time. He'd never killed a man, but he called one of the loaves of bread Dave's Killer Bread. It's killer good. Say no to bread on drugs. None of these ideas individually were the eureka, but they all collectively add up. They start to add more and more momentum. That momentum compounds, and this sleepy little Portland bakery becomes a $50 million bread empire. Showing us you increase your odds of winning by aligning to multiple trends. Convergence can be combining, adding value in a different way, bringing something digital where you had a physical product, aligning multiple forces, or being very imaginative about who you might co-brand with. I have a different story on this, and just double check where I'm at. Yes, I have time for it. I try to say it as quick as possible because it's the story of my sister, and I can go off track with it. But this is Kyla, and she was an Oxford art history doctorate, and at a very young age, at age 25. They advanced her and allowed her to skip her master's, which they almost never do. And she's just so passionate and amazing about it. But at 25, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and given a 50-50 chance to live. And she had to make a decision, but her decision was she wanted to be the bright light and continue being the best professor anyone had. So she continued with her all-nighters to get her standing ovation. And 5 years later, she had gone through the treatment, but the cancer came back. And when it did, the doctor said, you need to do something different. You're simply putting too much stress on yourself. And if you don't quit, you're going to die. So she had to think about this a little bit differently, and she had to think, okay, if I'm not a professor, what could I impact the most in life? And she thinks that when she had cancer, the most difficult part was when you lose your eyebrows. She said when you lose your hair, you can get a wig, and it's kind of cool. But when you lose your eyebrows, you look in the mirror, and you see a sick person staring back at you, and that's the part that makes you feel bad. So she went to get her eyebrows tattooed in, but tattoo ink typically has a metallic pigment. So every time she would go to get an MRI, it would rip the metallic pigment out, and she needed 17 procedures to fix it. So she wanted to do something better, but she knew that if she was going to make a business out of this or help people with this, she'd need to make something gentle, safe, and realistic, and those three had never been done before. Gentle because you're operating on sensitive skin, maybe a patient. Safe because it can't be carcinogenic, and realistic because hers wasn't. So first she studied with plastic surgeons, and she managed to get the realistic eyebrow very quickly, which was, or the pigment you could put in very quickly, and that challenge she solved in not much time at all, just a few trips. But to find out how to make something you could do on sensitive skin, she realized the best place to go was prison, because prison tattoo artists have to tattoo in a way that causes no redness, or the guards will see and they get in trouble. So she met some of the Yakuza Mafia tattoo artists and bonded with them over a shared love of art. And she knows all about how these tattoos symbolize different things. A teardrop means you killed a man, 5 dots mean 5 years spent in jail, a clock with no hands means you're in for life, and if you're in Russia, stars on your knees mean you'll kneel for nobody. She shows them what she's doing. They reveal their secrets to help her, and pretty soon she's solved how to operate on a cancer patient. But next up, she needs to make it more realistic. And she thinks back to her days of art history, where she remembers Raphael, Da Vinci, Michelangelo. But this is her brother telling the story, so I don't know if you realize, but those are all Ninja Turtles. In their day, though, they were all jealous of Titian. Titian was the famous one at the time because he could do better pictures that would be commissioned because he could make a more realistic skin tone. And the way that he would do it was a secret. And Da Vinci would hire spies. Everyone was trying to figure out how was he possibly making the skin tone so real. And it turns out that he would mix his paint with egg whites, and instead of painting a figure once, he might paint it in 20 little layers, making something realistic. When Kyla combined all three, she realized she could restore cancer patients' eyebrows. This is an example of how she can cover a scar. And her real work that's amazing is how she can help a breast cancer patient recreate an areola. But this woman example is someone who was attacked by a dog when she was a kid, and Kyla's able to cover it up in one little session. The part that's probably the coolest, though, is that she's got 2 kids now, one that you saw when you challenged Allie to the paperclip, and she's cancer-free. So that's my sister. Thank you very much. Kyla taught me your breakthrough exists in some combination that you haven't seen. Convergence questions include what other services could be combined with your offering, or what companies could you collaborate with? Now I'm going to actually skip for you a couple of these because we are going to focus on divergence today as our final pattern, and I'm going to give you the rest as downloads. But now you've seen a couple slides, so I've piqued your interest, and you've got a hook to check out the freebies at the end. Divergence is the idea that I don't want to be part of the mainstream. Think Dexter, Weeds, Walter White, Wolf of Wall Street. They're all counterculture characters, but divergence is a little deeper than that. You can pick any industry, do the opposite, and actually do very well. if I looked at my little niece Allie, I don't know if I want to ever get her a princess doll because I don't want her to grow up with a princess complex. So I decided to ask her, do you like princess dolls? And she said, T-Rexes eat princesses for breakfast. Nom, 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 nom. Which explains the ugly doll story. So I'm sneaking through here. Where David Horvath here created an ugly little monster to be the opposite. And pretty soon it was $150 million business and toy of the year. Divergence is rebelling, customizing, personalizing, bringing status, or fashionizing. Your questions would be, what do people hate about an industry? And how could you be more customized, more unique, or different from the mainstream? And as we wrap it up, I have one final story for you about a guy that liked to go to conferences. This guy here, Dietrich, he liked to go to conferences because you meet new people, you have a good time. You guys having fun at the Change Leadership event? Yeah. And now the problem is that you'll have an evening, you'll have a night, and the next morning you got to wake up, perk up, and get back to work, which is less fun. So he realized there was a route around it. When he was in Thailand, he saw that the taxi drivers stay up all night. So he finds his taxi driver and he says, hey, how are you up all night? And his taxi driver says, yo, I'm on that Krating Dang. Can you get me on that Krating Dang? Sure, I'll hook you up, bruh. Now he's on that Krating Dang and he goes into his office. This is probably dramatized. Probably didn't go like this at all. But he goes to his boss and he tells her, I'm going to make that Krating Dang a business. I quit, yo. And then he leaves. And she's like, I don't know why he would, that's really weird. But he gets some of his buddies and he says to them, hey, can you try some of this Krating Dang? Quick little focus group. Tell me what you think. And they told him, this tastes awful. This is disgusting. You quit your job for this? You should go back to your boss and ask her for your job back. So what do you do if that's your situation? You think your idea can work, but it requires change and leadership to make happen. Do you accept no as an answer? Or if everyone else has a big can, do you have a small can? If everyone else charges $1, charge $3, then people will think there's something good in it. If everyone else has multiple product SKUs, that's confusing. Have just one magic bullet. And if everyone else has a legal and compliance team, am I right? You won't. You'll just hope, that the parachute opens and stuff, or else, like they were right. It's clear that $6 billion later, opposing the mainstream fuels success, but there's a deeper lesson in this, and to get it, I had to be the Canadian using his secret Canadian superpower, which we all know is beer drinking, at a conference where I saw the number 3 co-founder of Red Bull. So I could end you on this lovely story, but you'd have to be rowdy on it because this is Red Bull's secret, and this is not the secret they like to get out. Do you want a Red Bull secret backstory? All right, that was good, solid. Okay, so I have a couple beers with Hans Vrains, and he tells me he quits his job, he's number 3, he's so excited, and he's got a couple questions. First question, what's my marketing budget? And they tell him, it's $2.5 million. That's not much. I thought that was like my stake in the company. How did the focus group turn out? Bad. Actually, they used the word awful. Okay. Is there anything else I should have known about this job before I accepted? Yeah, we need you to use some of your money to solve the Thai PR crisis, the health crisis. What's the Thai PR crisis? Well, they're saying over there that this is bull testicle water. Yeah, but don't teenagers love that? New plan, unmoderated website. We have no editors, no lawyers, no compliance. It's just a forum for people to share the rumors. Pretty soon, everybody just thinks, knows, expects that this is bull testicle water. And as they go from country to country, there's a media uproar, and they become more successful. But one day, there's a drunk driving accident, and a court calls Red Bull in, and they said, we want to pull the product from the shelves. So Red Bull pulls out their legal defense, which is the honesty card. It's not bull testicle water. There's actually nothing much different in this than half a cup of coffee, and it tastes bad, actually awful, which we can prove with research. So the judge says, okay, we'll investigate your claim, but while we do, we're going to ask you to do something that you're not going to like. All right, fine. What do we have to do? We want you to put on a warning label. What? Yes! A warning label? How big can we make it? This is amazing. What do you want it to say? We'll put on whatever you want. Okay. Not for teenagers. Yes. What else do you want? We're good to go. Not for pregnant women? That's like a medical claim that it must work. I like it. Anything else? We're good with any suggestion. Yeah. Do not mix with vodka. The recipe's on the bottle. Now, I show you these examples because, Red Bull's not supposed to win. Red Bull is change. And that requires leadership to make happen, but recognize that everybody else in the game is also playing with rules, policies, procedures, structures, brand standards. Everybody's farming to some extent. And that means when you diverge, when you try something new or different, it actually becomes successful because people like change. There's a lot they don't like about it, but there's also that rebellious part of all of us that likes to try something different and new. All this wraps up to show that chaos creates predictable opportunity. And I'm going to give you a link here, and I got one last little minute of a part, but in my link, I want to show you, oops, that's my secret for you. That's at my link. You got to go to my link if you want to see that story. You'll never know it unless you take a photo of this link right here. TrendHunter.com/secret/change leadership. You got my homework questions, my framework, and $1,000 of free extras. I got my last book, which is half pictures, so you know it's good. And as well, we have our 2017 trend report, and plus all of this in video form, a couple different keynotes that I'm working on. And while you're there, you can take the assessment to figure out which traps impact you the most, which would make you a better leader when you're more aware of how those impact you. So with that said, I have one final minute for you, and it's the last little bit, so maybe just high five your neighbors so we get a little energy. You do that little neighborly high five. A little cheer. How you guys having fun at the Change Leadership event? Okay, here's my final little part for you then. You are experiencing history's highest rate of change, disruption, ambition, and opportunity. And there's never been a better time for you to be a leader wanting to make change happen, because we all need that so badly. You'll face your adversities, but as you do, remember that you're not here to protect the status quo. Now's the time for action. Now's the time to take risks. Now's the time to lead, to push your team and take them to new directions that you never took them before. You need to push them because nobody else will. So reach higher, take those leaps, and remember that you need to make change happen even if it seems hard, because that's how you'll get to your next level. In the words of my dad, now's when you break, push harder, act sooner, and never give up. And in my little words, if you want to get better and faster, be curious, be insatiable, and be willing to destroy. And remember, innovation's not about a big idea, it's finding all those little ideas you can make big. That's Change Leadership event. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming.
Wow! Now we know why they say an intellectual bowl of Red Bull, a can of Red Bull. Yeah, that's intellectual can of Red Bull. Thank you so much. Let's give it up for Jeremy again. Wow! Thank you so much. What a way. You know how it is after lunch? You know, you're a little bit tired. You're like, I need to sleep a little bit, but I think you woke us all up, right? You did. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Really appreciate you. We have Jeremy's books. So some of you have his books already. He's going to be available to sign the books at the back, right, just in front, into the backdrop. We also have some of his books for sale, so you can get a copy of his book, and he will be signing it graciously, correct?
All right, thank you very much. You bet.
Thank you. Wow.
Thanks, everybody.